today's video I'll show you how the last decade of apple breeding and selecting have shaped my small-scale breeding program. And I'll show you how you can keep your breeding program light, fun and very creative if you base it around a small number of effective principles. Now setting up a good breeding program and enjoying the process of creating new varieties, it's a little bit like learning how to drive a car. When you're first in a car, you have to understand how the car works. You also have to understand how the rest of traffic works, and you have to learn the basic rules. And then you want to combine all of this into a practice that tells you where to look at what moment. Once you have your driver's license for a long time, you drive and you do all these complex tasks actually without them costing a lot of energy or a lot of your awareness, because you can talk to other people, you can have other thoughts, and you automatically look at the right thing at the right time. Once you understand the basics of breeding, the breeding cycle, and working with trees, I feel that there is something similar that happens. It becomes very light again, it becomes a lot of fun again, and you are actually thinking about all kinds of other things while you look at the right thing at the right time, and you intervene or steer towards the left or the right, and it doesn't become a lot of work or a big burden on you. Because that's what it feels like when you start. You think, I have to learn all these things, it's super complex, will I ever understand this? What if everything gets sick? What if half of them die? Basically, that's all good. That really shouldn't keep you from doing this. Anybody can do this anywhere in the world on a very small plot without a lot of investment, and anybody can get great results and create new varieties for their own environment. And if you select also for organic varieties, you can help create a much better natural environment around the place where you live. And you do that while you're interacting with all these trees, with nature, with beautiful flowers, with the birds, with all the things that are going on in nature all the time. So it's a very enjoyable thing to do, and you just want to keep the fun part and the light part bigger than the work part and the stress part and the worrying part. So let's look at the basic idea of what breeding is, what a breeding cycle is, and whether we can condense that into a small and simple system. The last 10 years of apple breeding have taught me that the following things matter most during your breeding trials. And I will make a video on each separate subject in the coming months. But I will run through the subjects right now to share with you which experiences and which insights and which understanding I think matters most if you are intending to do a little small local breeding program like this. When you want to create new varieties by crossing two different parents, the first thing that you want to understand is how to collect and evaluate parent varieties. So how do you collect the existing varieties or the heirloom varieties for your region, and maybe other varieties that are not from your region but that have certain diseases or certain qualities, and end up with a good collection that has all the genetic qualities in it that you eventually want to recombine into your seedlings and into the new variety that you want to create. What you're looking for is to establish a collection of parents that has genetic variance. And what they mean by that is that as a painter you have to buy a set of paints that have all the reds, the blues, the yellows, the greens, the black and the white in them, so that you can recombine them. Apple breeding, it's the same, or any kind of breeding is the same. Of course it helps to think about what you want, because if you only want an apple that is juicy and crispy and sweet, you can take two commercial juicy, crispy, sweet apples and try to cross those, because that will give you a good chance to get another juicy, crispy, sweet apple, but that maybe will be undistinguishable from both parents or very similar. So usually in breeding you want to get one set of traits from one parent, say beautiful flowers or the skin color of a red apple, and you want another set of traits from the other parent, say red flesh or disease resistance, and then you want to combine these, and you get in the seedling generation all kinds of combinations of all these possible qualities, and then you want to select among those that one that has that combination of qualities that you were looking for. And very often there's another one in that generation that you weren't even looking for, but that surprises you, that has another set of traits, another combination that's actually very interesting, but you hadn't even thought of. It's just a present of Mother Nature of how this process works. The second thing is to understand how the breeding cycle works. The breeding cycle consists of having good parents, making crosses, growing out the seedlings, evaluating the seedlings in the right way, then drawing your conclusions about what mechanisms are at play, and these conclusions will help you to estimate either whether you already have achieved your goal or whether you have to make another cross or grow out another generation of seedlings before you get to your intended goal. Then you have to select from your seedlings either the new varieties that you want to release or the seedlings that you want to use as parents for the next generation. And once you want to release once you have found a good variety and you want to release it, you want to understand how to do that and what mechanisms apply there. And then the breeding cycle continues. Then you make you take these new varieties and you start to recombine those, and this cycle goes on and on and on. The third thing you want to understand is how inheritance mechanisms work. There's only a few, and they always work either in one way or the other way, and you want to learn how to recognize which mechanism is at play, and you can deduce that from your seedlings and the proportions in which the different qualities either show up or don't show up. I'm going to go through a list of questions that I've learned to ask myself after studying all the theoretical knowledge about breeding and genetics and how it works, because it helps to know all the mechanisms behind them, like dominant recessive genes, like how traits are inherited. But if you want to base your breeding program, like I do, just on interaction and just on observation, and just use your own senses to figure out what's going on, there's a set of questions that you ask yourself, and that can guide you in making better decisions for the next crosses that you want to make, or for how to select for the best apples. And it always helps to know the mechanism behind it, but the things that you want to ask yourself are, do you have enough genetic variance in your parents, and do you know the different traits of the parents that you're going to use, that you want to combine? And you can see that in the seedlings that come from that cross. You want to figure out, are certain traits, certain qualities, are they inherited in a gradual way? For instance, when I cross a red-fleshed apple with a white-fleshed apple, do I get all kinds of different shades of pink, from white to slightly pink, more pink, redder, very red and deep red in my seedlings? Or do I get two types of seedlings, one with red flesh, with all the red flesh looking more or less the same, and one with white flesh, with all the white flesh looking more or less the same? Or do I get something in between, like half of them with pure white flesh, and then the other half, the red flesh, they go from light pink to deep pink? It's something that you want to observe. It's something that you want to look at, and it's something of which you want to understand the numbers game, because that's the one really interesting thing about doing breeding. The ratio between the number of seedlings that turn out to be white-fleshed and the number of seedlings that turn out to be red-fleshed those ratios, they usually fall in the same categories if the same mechanism is working behind it. So you want to get not super precise, but an idea, are the proportions between my seedlings, like are they roughly half-half, or are they 1/4, 3/4, or are they like 1/16, 15/16? And so you get these ranges of proportions that you want to become aware of, because those proportions, they lead you to understand a very important mechanism, the importance of dominant and recessive genes behind certain traits. Because it's possible that you combine a very sweet apple with an acid apple, and you think, okay, if I cross those two together, I get something that's semi-sweet or acid. But it's possible that you get only acid apples. And then you think, this cross failed, I don't need to use that anymore. But if you know about the idea of dominant and recessive genes, then probably in those seedlings that turned out all to be acidic, they all have a recessive gene, which means that they carry the information for sweetness, but the sweetness is not expressed in that generation of seedlings. But if you cross two of those seedlings again with each other, then those recessive genes, they can recombine, which means that you get a new generation of seedlings where maybe half of them is sweet and the other half is acid. That means that there are traits that are inherited through generations that always skip a generation. They don't skip 2 generations or 3 generations or 4 generations. They can, but it's more that if you want a certain trait to show up in your seedlings, only dominant traits will show up in the first generation, but recessive traits can only show up in the generation afterwards if you cross the seedlings again. It's an important thing to know and to understand, because otherwise you can feel like, hey, why doesn't this work, and how can I get the sweetness into my seedlings, into my progeny? So in the fourth video I'll do is about how crosses work, the techniques of crosses and the things that can work or not work, the different types of plants, and how you want to organize and refine your technique on making crosses. And you have to understand whether these are what they would call outbreeding crops or inbreeding crops. And most fruit trees are outbreeding crops. And then I'll do a video on how you can observe and evaluate your seedlings and deduce from the proportions of seedlings that die or that grow very vigorously and that have the right qualities and that have the wrong qualities, how you can deduce which inheritance mechanisms are at work for each quality that you're interested in, and how you want to set up your next generation or your next cross or your next little trial. That means that when you make crosses in outbreeding crops, that when a trait disappears in the seedling generation, that was a recessive trait. When a trait comes back among the seedlings, roughly half on half, that means that was a dominant trait in one of the parents, and that parent has one dominant gene and one recessive gene for that same trait. That's the most important thing to ask yourself, and that's the most important thing that it leads you to conclude. So it's quite simple in a way, and you can do this with basic observation. Then I'll also do a video about the numbers that are involved, the numbers game, and how you can do that at a small scale with maximum effect. So there's a couple of different mechanisms that are at play, and each can lead you to a very effective small scale strategy in which you have really got the minimal number of seedlings, the minimal number of work with the maximum results and the maximum selection taking place. And this is what you want if you work on a small scale and you have just work and life and everything happening at the same time. So once you have some parents with some genetic variants, you know that you need to do 1 or 2 generations of crosses to get what you want, which in fruit trees means, if you can get your trees to fruit in 8 years, it means that it's a 16-year project at max and an 8-year project minimum. The next thing that you want to understand is how to make mistakes in an intelligent way, and that means how to set up your experiments in a way that even if everything fails, that you gain a lot of information while everything fails. So even if all your seedlings die one winter, then you'll know, if you set it up right, exactly what the cold hardiness is of your seedlings, or how much water they can tolerate or not. And if half of your seedlings suddenly get sick and die, but you have tagged them well and you know what the parents are, that really doesn't matter. It's not a failure if half of your seedlings, or maybe even 90% of your seedlings die, because the other 10% are going to be extremely valuable at that point. And so if you set everything up the right way, you can do this in a very relaxed way without worrying too much about what will happen to the seedlings, because it's nature, it's random, and things will go right and things will go wrong. So I really want to make a video about how to set up things in the right way, that if you're working on a small scale, you have a small sample of things. If you lose them and you cannot conclude anything from that loss, then it will feel like a lot of lost work and a lot of hard work lost. But if you set it up the right way, that doesn't matter, because you're keeping notes the right way, you're setting up your experiments in a way that no matter what happens, you'll learn something, and that will make it easier to pass to the next phase and the next cross, and to make things in a better way. And it's amazing how fast you can progress like that, even with small incremental insights like that. So you can take your time and relax into it. During those 8 years, you want to then understand the growing cycle of the crop you're working with, how that behaves in your climate, and you want to go to commercial growers and understand how commercial growers, in what kind of system do they produce these crops, right? For apples, for instance, nowadays everything is produced in these very intensively managed orchards of small spindle trees on dwarfing rootstock, and you want to understand how that works, because if you want to select something that can be useful for commercial growers in your area, you want to know under what conditions you want to select the winners, right? Because they will have to grow them in the same way that they grow their apples now. The next video I'll make is about evaluation and selection. So evaluating is evaluating the apples themselves, the flavor, and all the qualities that are involved with the apples, but also with the trees, if they get diseases, if they don't get diseases. And you want to evaluate in the right way, especially if you think about, in the end, releasing your variety to commercial growers or backyard growers or any kind of growers, because it's the evaluation that actually gives the apple its worth, or the variety its worth. It's the information that's known about it. And a lot of people come to fruit displays and say, oh, I have the best apple in the world. If they have not compared it to other apples that people are growing, and if they haven't kept any notes about how the tree, what time it flowers, how it goes through winters, how much water it needs, all those kind of things, it's basically useless for any kind of grower. Even if you have an apple that tastes delicious at that point, they'll say, yeah, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not. So it's the way you evaluate, the way you keep the information about that evaluation, that gives your variety, in the end, the value that it can have for other growers, for commercial growers, or for other gardeners. Because if you are creating new apples for yourself, probably flavor and the eating experience will be the most important thing that you want to select for. Then you can select for looks and for uniqueness, or for the time of harvest. But commercial growers, they also really want an apple to produce apples every year, because there is this tendency in some apple varieties to produce only 1 year in 2, and then to produce a very large crop, and then the next year nothing, and then a very large crop, and the next year nothing. For commercial growers, it's really hard to work with those kind of varieties to produce enough apples. And so they want apples that you can pick well, that you can store well, that look good when you sell them, that produce enough every year, and they want trees that are easy to prune, and for conventional orchards they want trees that are easy to spray. So those are all kinds of qualities that you would not yourself directly select for, and it's up to you whether you want to or not, but it's very interesting to go to commercial growers in your neighborhood and ask them what they select for and why they would choose certain varieties, and what they might really look for and that doesn't exist yet. Because it's not that you need to create that, but you might find among your program suddenly an apple of which you realize, hey, but this is exactly what this person was looking for the other day. Maybe not my favorite, but maybe I'll show it to him and maybe he can do something with it. And that will lead you to the next question, and that's how can you select better? I think everybody who starts doing the breeding is very interested in making crosses and how that works. And I think that's still a magical thing. But when you do it for a little bit longer and you are actually for years interacting with the plants and you start to know the local conditions that you grow in and the way the trees behave under your local conditions, then you start to understand the importance of selection. And I think maybe a bigger part of creation, especially in breeding, is selection, because the creation is sort of random. You take a couple of parents and you cross them, and that combines all their traits, and some in a very harmonious way and some in a not so harmonious way. And so it's the selection actually out of the seedlings that really creates new varieties. It's super interesting to learn, because that's where you really develop your own style, your own taste, your own preferences, your own possibilities. Breeding is creation of variation and then selecting among that variation those things that are truly more beautiful, more valuable, more tasty, and more interesting. Then I'll make a video about a subject that's very dear to my heart, and that is the blind spot of selection. This has to do a little bit with how the fact that if you're doing a breeding program like this, you're not only developing apples, but your whole idea about your interaction with nature, with life, it changes during these 10 years. You get new insights, you get new philosophies, and so there's this shadow side of selection, or this blind spot in people's way how they select things, that is very, very interesting to become aware of. And I'll make a video about the insights that I have found and developed and that I see now everywhere around me when you do this sort of selection and small-scale breeding. That's my experience, and I'm sure that anybody who starts doing this will not have the same vision, the same breeding roles when they start as when they develop their program. You realize much more what's possible and what you can do and what is needed, and that will develop the thing also that you will be looking for. And so the outcomes of the first generation, they show you a little bit how the genetics work, how the selection work, and they make you realize with a little bit more information about what other people like in apples and what growers like, you'll set new goals of what you were trying to make or find, or what you try to select out of the seedlings that you already have. So these things all make the breeding cycle work together, and for none of these steps you need a laboratory or a large piece of land or personnel or a microscope even. You just need to do it and get a feel for it. It's much more a feel of how things work and how easy they are or how difficult they are, than that you need to study a lot or have a lot of money or land or workers to do this for you. You'll run into a lot of bottlenecks in this breeding cycle, because the first time you do anything, it will usually not work. So learning how to make crosses Once you do it right, it's really not very complicated, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You can get the pollen wrong, you can store the pollen wrong, you can get your timing wrong and the cross won't take, or you've made a beautiful cross and it gets eaten by insects, or the fruit gets picked by a bird before it's ripe. So these things will happen, and there will be a lot of bottlenecks and a lot of setbacks in your program, but don't worry about them too much, because you have time. This takes a long time. You don't lose time. You just have the time to do it again and again and again. When something doesn't work, you just ask yourself, what could have happened here? What doesn't work? And what do I need to get better in the next time? And so you improve your technique of how you have to do everything. But for these techniques, you don't need anything special. I'll also do a video about the rewards that I have gotten from it, or that I get from it, once I release my varieties. But I can already tell you that the rewards are not the rewards that you think of when you start the breeding program. I started this with this idea in mind, how to create fantastic new flavored apples, and I'm doing it right now. So in that sense, it's a success and it's rewarding. But what is actually much more interesting is that it has become much more rewarding along the way, in ways that I could not have imagined before. So to do this small-scale breeding without being paid, just as a hobby, but in a serious way, it is incredibly rewarding. You just don't really get to decide beforehand what the reward is going to be. But it is absolutely worth your while. Then there's the challenge to keep all of this light, fun and interesting. I see that also with a lot of artists, because to work in art, it's not an easy way to make money. It's not really a job. You can only do it and keep doing it and eventually become successful at it if you actually enjoy the process of making art and of creation. And here it's a little bit the same. If you cannot keep it light and interesting and keep the process fun for you throughout these years, you will not be able to finish it. At the end, I'll do a video on something that I'm still working on myself, which is how to release your new varieties. Once you've found something that you think is really, really good and valuable, it still is quite a complex path to market. There's all kinds of rights here in the European Union. There's breeders' rights, there's variety rights, there's trademarks, there's varieties, there's club varieties, there's open varieties, there's heirloom varieties. There's all kinds of ways in which you can think of releasing your variety. And I'm exploring a little bit for myself how that works and which things are handy to do or not. And I will publish what I do here on this channel, and I'll do a video about this later on in the year. Those are things you need to think about once you've found something that you think is really interesting. Then you want to approach farmers, you want to approach the supermarkets or the local markets, and you want to find a path to market, and you want to think about how can you release this variety and share it with other people in a way either that you are paid royalties for your new variety, for your new invention, or not. And there's many of different possibilities for that, and that can feel a little bit intimidating for a person who doesn't do this all the time. And I'll show you on this channel in Bontekoe how I do that, how I work on that, and how I hope that that will work, because I do really want to release a couple of these varieties and see if they can be grown commercially. And the last video I'll make this year is about how to partner. I'm looking for partners, but doesn't matter where you are. You can be in beautiful South America, beautiful Africa, Asia, United States, Europe. It doesn't matter. Everywhere, I think, where you live, it's worthwhile to do this. And it is very rewarding to develop new varieties and to develop a way in which we as humans can live together and work with nature a little bit better, a little bit more harmoniously. And I think just for that, it's not worth it to leave the development of new varieties just to a couple of big organizations. You want to do this yourself because you want to interact with nature yourself. I'll do a video about how to set up a breeding program like this yourself, or when you're in the European Union, how to partner with me, how to trial my varieties, or how to set up a tasting garden with the most promising varieties that I am developing, or with the seedlings of future crosses that I will make. I will always be looking for people who have land or terrain or who are interested in developing a local, valuable new variety for the local organic farmers of their region. So all in all, that's the way my small breeding program should work as a pipeline, and it would be beautiful, I think, for it to work continuously. So it's not to try to make this into a project that at one time I make a huge number of seedlings, grow these out for 8 years and then get the best apple out of it, because our environment changes continuously. That's the way nature is. We talk about climate change, but there's many different changes. There's all kinds of changes in how our population grows, how our urban centers grows, how the way we farm develops, the availability of water, of land, the tastes of people, what kind of crops they eat and what they expect from apples or not. This all changes all the time, and so it's much more natural to continuously have this pipeline on a small scale, locally, have always new apple seedlings in the ground, new crosses made, new selections being made that are always up to date, because maybe in 10 years we will need to grow apples that do better under different climatic conditions, or that are more resistant to drought, or that handle different insects, plagues, or that have a different kind of flavor that people want to buy. And so to do this on a small scale, but in a very effective way, every year a couple of seedlings, every year a good selection, every year some new varieties, that would be my dream about this.